My name is Bertha, and at 55 years old I thought I knew everything about my husband Harold after 32 years of marriage. When he passed away from a sudden heart attack last month, I felt like my world had crumbled completely. Sitting alone in our big Connecticut home surrounded by his belongings and memories, I wondered what I was supposed to do with the rest of my life. Little did I know that Harold had left me with more than just grief and loneliness. He had left me with secrets that would soon prove to be my salvation. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever had to keep something hidden for the right reasons, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about truth revealed at just the right moment. Harold and I had built what I thought was a simple, honest life together. He worked as an aerospace engineer for Boeing for 15 years before transferring to a smaller company in Hartford, while I spent 25 years as a nurse at our local hospital. I had retired early 3 years ago to take care of Harold when his heart condition started getting worse. We lived modestly in our 3-bedroom colonial house, the same one where we had raised our daughter Emma. Emma was 28, now married to Brad, a lawyer who always seemed to look down on our middle-class lifestyle. They lived in an expensive condo in Boston and were constantly complaining about money, even though they both had good jobs. Emma worked for a financial consulting firm, but somehow she and Brad were always struggling to keep up with their lavish spending habits. Our relationship had grown strained ever since Emma married Brad 2 years ago. She used to visit us every weekend, but those visits became less frequent and more tense. Emma would walk through our house with a critical eye, making comments about our outdated furniture and inefficient heating system. She seemed embarrassed by our simple way of living, especially when Brad made snide remarks about our quaint little house and our old-fashioned approach to money management. Harold had always been patient with Emma's attitude, but I could see it hurt him. He worked hard his entire life to provide for our family, and he deserved more respect than what our daughter and her husband showed him. Harold was the kind of man who fixed everything himself, who grew vegetables in our backyard, and who saved every penny for our future. The day Harold died was just like any other Tuesday morning. He had gone outside after breakfast to tend to his tomato plants, something he did religiously every day during growing season. When he didn't come in for lunch, I went looking for him and found him collapsed between the tomato rows, his gardening gloves still on his hands. The paramedics said he had died instantly from a massive heart attack. The funeral was small and simple, just the way Harold would have wanted it. Emma and Brad flew in from Boston, but I noticed they seemed more concerned with the logistics of the service than with actually grieving. Emma kept asking questions about Harold's affairs and whether everything was in order financially. At the time, I thought she was just trying to be helpful during a difficult time. 3 days after we buried Harold, I finally gathered the strength to go through his home office. Harold had always been meticulous about organizing his paperwork, but he had never let me handle the financial details. He always said he wanted to spare me the worry of bills and investments. As I sat at his old wooden desk sorting through bank statements and insurance papers, I felt overwhelmed by how much I didn't know about our financial situation. That's when I discovered the hidden compartment behind the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet. Inside a small metal lockbox, I found documents that completely changed everything I thought I knew about our life. The first thing I saw was a bank statement from an account I had never heard of. Harold had accumulated $380,000 through careful investments and stock purchases over the past 20 years. I had no idea he was even involved in the stock market. But the real shock came when I found the property deed for a house in Provence, France. According to the documents, Harold had inherited this property from his Uncle Robert in 2018. Uncle Robert had been estranged from the family for decades, and I had only met him once at our wedding. Apparently, he had left his entire estate to Harold as his only surviving nephew. The photographs of the property took my breath away. It was a beautiful stone farmhouse with 3 bedrooms surrounded by 3 acres of vineyard and lavender fields. The house had been completely renovated and was currently being rented to a local French family for €15,000 per year. Harold had been collecting rental income for 4 years without ever mentioning it to me or Emma. I called the property management company in France and spoke with a lovely woman named Marie, who had been handling the rental arrangements. She explained that the tenants were a wonderful family who took excellent care of the property and had been hoping to renew their lease for another 5 years. The house was in perfect condition and had been generating steady income since Harold inherited it. At the bottom of the lockbox, I found a letter addressed to me in Harold's handwriting. In it, he explained that he had been saving the house as a surprise for our retirement. He had planned to take me Memoirs for our 35th wedding anniversary next year and reveal that we could spend our golden years traveling between Connecticut and France. He wrote that he had kept it secret because he wanted to make sure everything was perfect before sharing his dream with me. Sitting there in his office holding that letter, I cried harder than I had since the day he died. Harold had been planning a beautiful future for us, and now I would have to navigate that future alone. But I also felt a strange sense of relief and excitement. For the first time since Harold's death, I had hope for what lay ahead. I decided not to tell Emma about either the money or the house in France. Something about her behavior at the funeral had made me cautious. I would reveal only Harold's basic pension from Boeing, which amounted to $2,100 per month, and the small savings account we had always maintained, which contained about $45,000. 3 days later, Emma and Brad showed up at my door with concerned expressions and a briefcase full of papers. Emma hugged me tightly and said she had been worried sick about how I was managing on my own. Brad nodded seriously and suggested we sit down to discuss my financial situation like adults. Emma pulled out a yellow legal pad and started asking questions about Harold's pension, our savings, and what kind of debts we had outstanding. I told them about Harold's Boeing pension and our small savings account, watching their faces carefully as I spoke. I could see Brad doing quick calculations in his head, and Emma's expression grew increasingly worried. Brad cleared his throat and launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech about the realities of fixed-income living. He explained that my monthly expenses for the house utilities insurance and basic needs would likely exceed Harold's pension by several $100s each month. He said I would be bleeding money and would exhaust our savings within 2 years if I didn't make some major changes. Emma nodded along with everything Brad said, adding her own comments about how impractical it was for me to stay in such a large house. She pointed out that I didn't need 3 bedrooms and that the heating costs alone would eat up a significant portion of my monthly income. She suggested I should consider selling the house and moving into a nice apartment, or maybe even a retirement community where I wouldn't have to worry about maintenance and repairs. I listened politely to their concerns, but something about their approach felt wrong. They seemed more excited about the prospect of selling the house than worried about my well-being. When I mentioned that I wasn't ready to make such a big decision so soon after Harold's death, Emma's expression shifted to frustration. Brad leaned forward and started talking about estate planning and how important it was to make smart financial decisions while I was still thinking clearly. He offered to help me manage any money from selling the house, suggesting that his firm could invest it in ways that would generate better returns than keeping it in a simple savings account. Emma jumped in to support Brad's offer, saying that I shouldn't have to worry about complicated financial decisions during such a difficult time. She said they could handle all the details and make sure I was taken care of properly. The way she said "taken care of" made me uncomfortable, like I was already incapable of making my own decisions. When they left that evening, they promised to return the following week with some options for me to consider. Emma kissed my cheek and said she was only thinking about my future security, but I noticed she and Brad exchanged a look that I couldn't quite interpret. That night, I called my best friend Margaret, who had been my neighbor for 20 years. I told her about Emma and Brad's visit, and she immediately expressed concern about their pushiness. Margaret reminded me that I was only 55 years old and perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. She suggested I be very careful about any decisions I made while I was still grieving. As I lay in bed that night, I made a decision. I would not reveal the truth about Harold's hidden assets until I was certain about Emma's true motives. Something told me that patience would serve me well in the coming weeks. Over the next 2 weeks, Emma called me every single day, sometimes twice. Each conversation revolved around my financial crisis and the urgent need to sell the house. She had apparently been researching retirement communities and kept sending me brochures for places that cost $3,000 per month. When I pointed out that this was more than Harold's entire pension, she said that's exactly why we needed to unlock the equity in my house. Emma's daily calls became increasingly aggressive. She would start each conversation by asking how I was feeling, but within minutes she would be talking about property taxes, utility costs, and home maintenance expenses. She had obviously been doing research because she started quoting specific numbers about heating oil costs and roof replacement expenses that I had never mentioned to her. The breaking point came when Brad showed up unannounced with a real estate agent named Jennifer Walsh. Brad claimed they had just been in the neighborhood and thought it would be helpful for me to get a professional opinion about the house's value. Jennifer walked through every room with a clipboard measuring spaces and taking notes about needed updates. When Jennifer finished her assessment, she sat me down at my kitchen table and explained that my house could sell for approximately $485,000 in the current market. She said that after closing costs and agent fees, I would net about $450,000. Emma's eyes literally lit up when she heard this number, and I watched her exchange another meaningful look with Brad. Brad immediately started talking about investment opportunities, explaining how $450,000 could generate enough monthly income to cover all my living expenses if invested properly. He said his firm specialized in conservative investments for retirees and could guarantee me a return that would provide long-term financial security. Emma enthusiastically supported Brad's proposal, saying it would give her such peace of mind to know that I was financially stable. She painted a picture of me living comfortably in a cozy apartment with no worries about home repairs or yard maintenance. She said I could travel, take up new hobbies, and enjoy my retirement without the stress of home ownership. But then, Emma's tone changed. When I said I needed time to think about such a major decision, she became visibly frustrated. She started talking about how stubborn I was being and how I wasn't thinking practically about my situation. She said she was tired of worrying about me every day and that it wasn't fair for me to put such stress on her and Brad. Brad joined in explaining that the real estate market was currently favorable for sellers, but that could change at any time. He said waiting too long could cost me tens of thousands of dollars if property values declined. He made it sound like I was being financially irresponsible by not jumping at their advice immediately. Emma's final argument was the most manipulative. She started crying and said that she just wanted to know that her mother would be safe and secure. She said that if something happened to me while I was struggling financially, she would never forgive herself. She made it seem like selling the house was something I owed her for her peace of mind. After they left that day, I sat in Harold's chair and tried to process what had just happened. My own daughter was pressuring me to sell my home and turn over my money to her husband's investment firm. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that Emma and Brad were having serious financial problems and saw my house as their solution. Margaret came over that evening and I told her everything. She was outraged by Emma's behavior and warned me to be very careful. She reminded me that once I gave someone control over my finances, it would be very difficult to get that control back. Margaret's husband had worked in banking for 30 years, and she had seen too many elderly people taken advantage of by their own children. That night, I made two important phone calls. First, I called a lawyer to ask about my rights regarding property sales and financial management. Second, I called Marie in France to ask more questions about the house in Provence. By the time I went to bed, I had decided to keep my secrets a little while longer. I wanted to see just how far Emma would push before I revealed the truth. 1 month after Harold's funeral, Emma arrived at my house with an entirely different demeanor. Gone was the pretense of gentle concern. Instead, she walked in carrying a leather briefcase and announced that she had taken care of everything for me. Brad followed behind her with a smug expression like they were about to solve all my problems, whether I liked it or not. Emma spread papers across my dining room table and started explaining what she had arranged. She had already contacted Sunset Manor, a retirement community 30 minutes away, and put down a deposit to hold an apartment for me. The monthly fee was $2,800, which she said was reasonable, considering it included meals, housekeeping, and activities. But that wasn't the worst part. Brad pulled out legal documents that he claimed would give Emma power of attorney over my finances. He explained that this was standard procedure for widows my age and would protect me from making emotional decisions during my grief period. He said Emma could handle all the details of selling the house and investing the proceeds, so I wouldn't have to worry about anything. When I told them I wasn't ready to sign anything, Emma's mask completely fell away. She slammed her hand on the table and said I was being impossible. She accused me of being mentally confused by grief and claimed I wasn't capable of making rational financial decisions. She said that if I didn't cooperate, she would have no choice but to petition the court to declare me incompetent. Brad nodded seriously and said that at my age, after such a traumatic loss, it would be easy to demonstrate that I needed someone to manage my affairs. He said judges see cases like mine all the time and usually side with concerned adult children who are trying to protect their elderly parents from financial ruin. Emma's voice got louder as she continued her tirade. She said I was being selfish and stubborn, that I wasn't thinking about how my poor decisions would affect her future. She said she and Brad had their own financial responsibilities and couldn't afford to support me when I inevitably ran out of money. Then Emma dropped her bombshell. She announced that she had already signed a contract to sell my house. She said the closing date was set for the following Tuesday, and I needed to be packed and moved out by then. She had forged my signature on the listing agreement and told the buyer that I was eager to sell quickly. I sat there in stunned silence as Emma explained how she had handled everything. She had contacted the same real estate agent who had evaluated the house and told her that I had decided to sell immediately. She had accepted an offer of $470,000 and had already deposited the earnest money. As far as the buyer and agent knew, I was fully aware and cooperative with the sale. Brad pulled out more papers and explained that the proceeds from the house sale would be transferred directly into an investment account that he would manage. He said this was the safest option and would ensure that I couldn't make any impulsive decisions with the money. He made it sound like he was doing me a huge favor. Emma's final demand was that I pack 2 suitcases with my most important belongings. Everything else would either be sold with the house or donated to charity. She said she didn't have time to deal with decades of accumulated junk, and that starting fresh would be good for me. When I asked what would happen if I refused to cooperate, Emma and Brad exchanged a look that chilled me to the bone. Brad calmly explained that they had already consulted with his law firm about guardianship procedures. He said that if I continued to act irrationally, they would have me evaluated by a psychiatric professional who would almost certainly recommend that Emma be appointed as my guardian. Emma stood up and announced that I had exactly 2 weeks to get used to the idea. She said she would return the following Tuesday with a moving truck and expected me to be ready to go to Sunset Manor. She kissed my forehead like I was a confused child and said that someday I would thank her for making the hard decisions that I was too emotional to make myself. After they left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, thinking about what had just happened. My own daughter had essentially stolen my house and was planning to take control of my entire life. She had manipulated legal documents, lied to real estate professionals, and threatened to have me declared incompetent if I didn't comply with her demands. But as I sat there, I found myself smiling. Emma and Brad had no idea what they were really dealing with. They thought they were outsmarting a grief-stricken widow, but they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. In 2 weeks, when they returned with their moving truck, I would be ready for them. The moment Emma and Brad drove away, I picked up my phone and called Robert Chen, the attorney Harold and I had used for our wills. I explained everything that had happened, and Robert was horrified. He confirmed that Emma had no legal power of attorney, and that forging my signature on real estate documents was a serious felony. He said we had grounds for criminal charges and advised me to contact the police immediately. My next call was to Jennifer Walsh, the real estate agent. When I explained that I had never authorized the sale of my house and that my signature had been forged, she was shocked. Jennifer said she would immediately contact the buyer to explain the situation and cancel the transaction. She also said she would file a report with the State Real Estate Commission about Emma's fraudulent behavior. Robert worked quickly to protect my interests. By the end of that week, he had filed injunctions to prevent any transfer of property and had reported the fraud to both local police and the district attorney's office. He also helped me transfer all my known assets into new accounts that Emma couldn't access, even if she somehow obtained real power of attorney. But my most important call was to Marie in France. I explained my situation and asked about the possibility of spending some time at the Provence house. Marie was incredibly helpful, explaining that the current tenants were planning to visit family in Italy for the entire month of August. She offered to coordinate with them so I could stay at the house during their absence, giving me time to decide whether I wanted to make any permanent changes to the rental arrangement. I spent the next week making preparations that Emma knew nothing about. I obtained an expedited passport renewal, made reservations for a flight to Paris, and arranged for Margaret to handle my mail while I was away. Robert set up international banking access so I could manage my finances from France if necessary. I also did something that felt wonderfully liberating. I went shopping for new clothes, something I hadn't done in years. I bought a wardrobe suitable for French country living, comfortable cotton dresses, walking shoes, sun hats, and a beautiful blue sweater that reminded me of the lavender fields in the photographs Harold had hidden away. During those 2 weeks, Emma called several times to check on my progress with packing. Each time, I told her everything was going according to plan. I wasn't lying. I was just following a very different plan than the one she had in mind. Margaret was my co-conspirator during this period. She helped me pack one small suitcase with essentials for my trip to France, and we carefully rehearsed what would happen when Emma returned. Margaret would be watching from her kitchen window, ready to call the police at the first sign of trouble. On the Sunday before Emma's scheduled return, I moved most of my valuables to a safety deposit box and left detailed instructions with Robert about handling any legal issues that might arise while I was in France. I felt more prepared and empowered than I had since Harold's death. The night before Emma's return, I slept peacefully in my own bed for what I thought might be the last time in a while. But instead of feeling sad, I felt excited about the adventure that lay ahead. Harold's secret gift was about to become my salvation, and Emma's greed was about to become her downfall. When I woke up Tuesday morning, I made myself a nice breakfast and put on one of my new dresses. Then I sat in Harold's favorite chair with a cup of coffee, watching the driveway and waiting for my daughter to arrive. I had never felt more ready for anything in my life. At exactly 10 o'clock in the morning, I saw Emma's car pull into my driveway, followed by a large moving truck. I remained seated in Harold's chair, sipping my coffee and watching through the window as Emma and Brad got out of the car looking confident and self-satisfied. They had probably spent the entire drive congratulating themselves on their clever plan to take control of my life. Emma rang the doorbell twice before using her key to let herself in. She called out cheerfully, asking if I was ready to start my new adventure. When she found me sitting calmly in the living room, she looked around expectantly for packed boxes and suitcases. "Mom, why haven't you packed anything?" Emma asked, her voice already showing signs of irritation. "The movers are here, and we need to get you moved into Sunset Manor today. I told them we'd be done by early afternoon." I looked up at her with the most peaceful expression I could manage. "Well, honey, there's nothing to pack." Brad stepped forward with his typical condescending smile. "Bertha, I know this is difficult, but you really do need to take this seriously. We've gone to a lot of trouble to arrange everything for you. The least you can do is cooperate." "Oh, I'm being very serious," I replied calmly. "In fact, I've never been more serious about anything in my life. You see, I know exactly what you two have been trying to do, and I've taken appropriate action to stop you." Emma's face began to change as she realized something was wrong. "What are you talking about, Mom? Stop what we're trying to help you." I stood up slowly and walked to the window where I could see the moving truck parked uselessly in my driveway. "I'm talking about the forged documents, Emma. I'm talking about the fraudulent house sale and your plan to steal my home and my money. Did you really think I was too stupid or too grief-stricken to figure out what you were doing?" The color drained from Brad's face, but he tried to maintain his lawyer's composure. "I don't know what you think you've discovered, Bertha, but Emma has been acting in your best interests. Everything we've done has been legal and appropriate." "Really?" I turned back to face them both. "So, you think forging my signature on legal documents is appropriate? You think lying to real estate agents is legal? You think threatening to have me declared incompetent is in my best interests?" Emma started to stammer something about protecting me from myself, but I held up my hand to stop her. "Let me tell you what's really been happening while you two were planning to rob me blind," I continued. "First, I contacted my attorney, who confirmed that you have no legal authority to sell my house or manage my finances. Second, I contacted the police, who are very interested in prosecuting cases of elder fraud and document forgery. Third, I contacted the real estate agent, who was horrified to learn that she had been unknowingly participating in a fraud scheme." Brad's lawyer training finally kicked in, and he started making threats about my mental competency, but I cut him off. "And fourth," I said with a smile, "I think it's time you learned the truth about my actual financial situation. You see, Harold left me much better provided for than I initially let you believe." I walked to Harold's desk and pulled out copies of the bank statements and property deeds that I had prepared for this moment. Emma and Brad watched in growing horror as I explained about the hidden savings account and the house in Provence. "You mean you've had all this money the whole time?" Emma whispered, staring at the bank statement showing nearly $400,000. "Not just money," I said. "A beautiful house in France that's been generating rental income for years. Harold left me completely financially independent, and you two were trying to steal a house from someone who owns property on 2 continents. Brad tried one last desperate legal maneuver, claiming that I had been deceiving them and that they had acted in good faith based on the information I provided. That's when I heard the sound I had been waiting for, police sirens coming up my driveway. Emma started crying and begging me to understand that she had only been trying to help. She claimed that she was worried about me and that everything had been Brad's idea. But it was too late for excuses. The police officers who came to my door had warrants for both of them based on the fraud charges Robert had filed. As they handcuffed Brad and read him his rights, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness because my own daughter had tried to steal from me, but relief because Harold's secrets had saved me from becoming a victim. Emma was crying hysterically as they led her to the police car, begging me to forgive her and drop the charges. She kept saying she was sorry and that she never meant for things to go so far, but I knew that she was only sorry because she got caught. After the police left with Emma and Brad, I called the moving company to explain that their services wouldn't be needed. The truck driver was actually sympathetic when I told him what had happened. He said he had seen similar situations before where family members tried to force elderly relatives out of their homes. That afternoon, I called Marie in France and confirmed my plans to visit the Provence house in 2 weeks. Then I called Margaret to share the good news that everything had worked out exactly as we had hoped. As the sun set that evening, I sat in Harold's chair once again, but this time I was planning a trip to France instead of defending my right to stay in my own home. Harold's love and foresight had protected me in ways he never could have imagined. His secrets had become my strength, and his hidden gifts had become my freedom. The next morning I would start planning the French adventure that Harold had dreamed of sharing with me. But that night, I simply sat in our home, grateful for the wisdom to keep quiet when speaking up would have cost me everything. Have you ever had to keep a secret that ended up protecting you when you needed it most? Have you experienced family members who put money before relationships? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And let me know if you think I made the right choice in handling my daughter's betrayal. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear about the importance of protecting yourself from those who would take advantage of your trust. Subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places and learning that sometimes the people closest to us aren't always looking out for our best interests. Remember that it's never too late to discover new possibilities for your life, no matter what challenges you're facing. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that wisdom and patience often triumph over greed and manipulation. May you always have the courage to protect what's rightfully yours, and the wisdom to know who truly deserves your trust.